I just started our YouTube stream, and here is Craig coming into the room.
And also sounds like this, Don, if you give me the username.
Now recording.
Welcome to the Yanggang Roundtable. It's Sunday, November 15th, 2020. I have a small group with me today of Ariel, Karen, Moto, and me. And it's our Sunday open discussion. We're just kind of relaxing, decompressing, thinking about basic income, poverty, and electoral politics as we are wont to do. So, how's it going, fellas?
Not bad, not bad.
I get to be one of the guys today?
If you like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is your turn to say your piece, you know. If there's things you'd like to tell guys. Or,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, man, that's a list.
All right.
Let it rip.
Goodness.
Oh. Well, I actually looked up based on kind of what was in the zeitgeist. Irving Goffman, I read a book of his called Stigma, dealing with a spoiled identity. And he described the situation of an individual who's disqualified from full social acceptance. And it just feels like we are chipping all over in the political realm, identity. And then it becomes a dividing point that just never quite ever resolves and is really hard to talk about because it kind of is a coin of the realm in a sense, some ways, and also just something where we struggle to, when someone kind of gets locked into, like you're having a discussion about UBI, which is really about changing the class structure and inviting the spoiled identity of people who are in poverty. To me, kind of like one of the ways I shift my own thinking is to not talk about a poor person or poverty in that same sense without mentioning Guy Standing's word precariat or precarity, because it becomes less as sort of a post-it note on the person and more an analysis of society. And then literally with COVID, you get everyone's precariat except for, a handful of people. Although Elon Musk got COVID, so he did have a vulnerability.
Oh, geez.
So it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the virus. Can cut. I mean, a lot of things can cut across class lines.
Yeah.
I think for me, and this is kind of me going back to Marxism a little bit, is that a lot of people kind of treat class like an identity, which I don't think it is. It's literally describes your position relative to the production in the economy and what level of production you're at. So you can change your class can change depending on if your relation to production changes. And I think like a lot of the times people get into the habit of being like, oh, people are just, the problem with class is that people are just mean to poor people. And I don't think that's ultimately all that helpful. I think there's definitely some assumptions that come with poor people being immoral, and but it's not. Ultimately, I think we need to fix is literally the problem of class itself. I mean, obviously that's a long way off, if ever, but I don't know. That's my take on it.
I had a big debate with a gentleman who was about workers' paradise, a workers' paradise that's found in the kind of thinking. And then I said, well, I was a lifetime caregiver and a parent. So it's like I produced a worker, but that wasn't considered productive in that definition. So we do have very fluid definitions coming up of what productivity is. Then here comes automation.
Yeah, the home life thing has actually been a huge topic of debate, I think, in socialist circles for years in terms of its own relation to production and capitalism. And generally speaking, I think a commonly shared opinion is that it is definitely a kind of work, and one that goes too often uncompensated.
And like I Well, I want to speak about like before we started the recording. It's like the people who are getting the most attention. It's like are the ones who can afford to get it the most, and the people who actually need like help and attention and like to be paid attention to are the ones not getting it. And that's like an amazing thing, because when they say you have freedom of speech, the like, but you probably want your speech to change something in the world. If you have freedom of speech and you're just speaking in the middle of the forest, if a tree falls down the forest and nobody saw it, did it actually happen? Or if you have freedom of speech but your speech is being like viewed and heard and listened to and like taken into consideration, it's much different than just speech that's just like you're alone in the elevator. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this usually plays out. At least now, it seems like the right to speech versus the right to a platform, and you
Hmm.
hear a lot about like deplatforming, and
Mhm.
I think they're closely related, and I think they're ultimately not as different as people want to make them out to be.
Hmm. Yeah, and the interesting thing is like the people at who and basically like it's buying speech. So basically, like the more people, the more ear holes and eyeballs you get, the more power your speech is gonna have. No matter, especially if you can make it like entertaining, and that requires even a level of like acting and that kind of talent too. So it's not an even playing field by any stretch of the imagination. It's like you might be like the highest IQ, most intelligent person with like well thought out points, and you've done your research and you've looked into things, and you have even a degree, and no one's listening to you, or you don't have the money to like get the services to make your speech interesting enough for people to listen, or hire an search engine optimization guy. But on the other hand, you can be like a complete wacko lunatic with like the right kind of connections with parents who have tons of money, and create a whole media empire. It's like like you know and you may not even have a high school diploma. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
freedom of speech, but not freedom of amplification. So
right.
you can say anything, but it'll cost you to bring it to a larger way, and that can either be bought by, I mean, almost all of that amplification is theatrics. It's theatrical.
Right.
So you can either buy, quality, like you were talking about, sound quality and picture quality, and then you can actually buy promotion, whereas
Hmm.
someone else can't get all those things put together, so they may have to do something even more theatrical and dramatic in order to have their amplification.
Yeah, 100%.
No, I think that's a really a good turn of phrase, freedom of amplification, because I think that really gets at the heart of it. You can say whatever you want into a vacuum, but what gets picked up and what is allowed to be amplified is a whole different
Whole new
matter.
ball game.
One
And
part of
that's something we never
amplification.
we never learn, and we never even like we don't learn that, and we don't understand that. So we're under this illusion that everybody's on a level playing field, right?
Yeah, part of amplification too is, we have the duopoly because the duopoly serves somebody. So when you have there's a rap song, and I know I get teased about knowing that about this rap song, but it was "Love Me or Hate Me, Still an Obsession." So the real powerful amplifiers
Right.
can use the hate
That's Lady
and the
Sovereign.
adverse.
Yeah.
That's right.
Ah, yeah.
I love
Sorry.
that. I
Sorry,
love
go
that
on. Yeah.
song.
No, yeah. That's a
I
good,
had
you
it
know
on a
what?
mixtape.
Underrated song. I like it too. All right. So please continue.
Yeah. Well, I kind of got the clue from that really powerful amplifiers use both modalities. It's in mathematical terms like attention and the absolute value. So either way, they're getting sort of attention points for doing that.
Right. Well, it's kind of like a toddler. They raise their arms, they scream and they shout, and the parents hate it, but they're going to do something to pacify it, right?
Now this parent's going to take them out into the car, and we'll wait till that calms down before we go back in.
Right. Yeah. But still, that's attention, right? It's like they can do it, but it's disgusting when we see the president do it. Right. It's kind of like that, but it's all just for the real estate in people's minds.
Well, he obviously knows that if he is outrageous, that he draws attention to himself. He's not going to say something neutral or calming or de-escalating, because the power position, the amplification of his own voice is what he's lived by forever.
Right, exactly. And that's where, if we had like a more self-aware populace, they'd the biggest weapon is like ignoring him. He'd probably implode. So well, I mean, not say anything, but like when Hitler, lost his audience, like that's what drove him to kill himself. Because it's like, who's Hitler without all of his adoring fans?
Well, that, and he had the Russians and the Allies breathing down on him, but yeah.
Right. But still, like I watched the documentary on it. They said, without the throngs of his, supporters, that's the thing. And I think to a certain extent, like, our culture has become like this, and it's really freaking sad. It's like we're not like community oriented or like family oriented. So a person who doesn't have, and it's happened to me, like strong family bonds or friendship bonds or a very low sense of community, it's like, well then, okay, like, let me create a cult of personality for myself, for people to adore me and things like that, because it's like they don't get that anywhere else.
I always feel like an old man when I start talking about like cultures of narcissism and whatnot, but there definitely is something to that. And I want to say and I'm not going to put it in generational terms because I think it affects, across the board, but definitely a move towards kind of narcissistic, neurotic introspection, kind of taken to the level of almost religion. It's everything is being individualized to the point where we no longer have really a society, or at least not a fully functional society. We have a lot of like solipsistic people trying to define their own realities, but I mean, the other side of that is we do still have a society, in that people are being sold this as an ideology that they're then participating in as individuals. So
and that was what was so beautiful about Andrew Yang. It's like, he didn't demand our worship. He just wanted to help us. He didn't say like, oh, and like Trump, are you fucking demanding worship? Like, oh, like, love me, I'm your God, I'm your savior. Yang, like, hey, you're going through problems and I'm here to help, and let's figure this out together. Like, not like I'm above you, I'm smarter than you, and like, join me or you're like a complete fool. It was like, hey, like, you're going through rough times, and let's be a community and let's solve these problems together. And like, we were the most not cult of all of them. We were the most, that's what's so it's like, oh, like, yo, you worship this one man and all of that. No, he was a friend, a helper, not a cult leader, and he still is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from the Bernie side of thing, and we got called a cult all the time too. But I mean, the funny thing is, I think after
Hmm.
Bernie ended up just kind of going, like, diffused into the party with Biden, I
Yeah.
don't think the loyalty of his followers were there. I think he
Hmm.
he ultimately was a vehicle for dissatisfaction and whatnot. And
Right.
I don't have quite the same insight into Yang's following,
Yeah.
other than you guys. But
Well, I kind of see like, I'm sorry, Bernie was a little more of a cult because like the way he treated us on this side, not all of them,
well,
some
I
of
mean, the
them.
thing is that they would say the same thing about Yang. So it's
Right.
always the
Yeah.
inside outside view.
But the thing is like I don't know, but show me an instance where like Yang followers would just like attack, Bernie people, like, and not as retaliation, just start some stuff.
I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
it, but again, I don't think that's ultimately that important. I think that's just
Yeah.
the political movements clashing with each other, and that's going to happen to
Yeah,
some
I
degree.
mean it's natural because
Yeah,
when you're both after the same thing, like three people after the same job, they're gonna say,
yeah,
"Oh,
and then there's also a lot of overlap between the two movements, so
right,
there's
yeah,
a lot of
for sure."
territorial.
But I'm just saying, like, I everybody's like people are waiting for like their knight in shining armor or something like that. But like with Yang, it's like I realize like we can all be like our own kind of like heroes, and we can all bring something to the table, and that's a much better kind of like this community thing, as Shale was even saying, like interpersonal responsibility is important too, and it's just it's just like I mean, because I used to be one where I said like, oh, I want a big platform on YouTube, and I want like my thousands of subscribers and hundreds of like views and all that stuff. But then it was like, you know what, like maybe it's just best if I just kind of solve my problems and make like good friends instead of just this like wanting people to like, oh, take my word as gospel.
I think you're onto a newly blossoming systemic problem, which is for decades we have optimized for just maximizing number of viewers, but we've paid no attention whatsoever to the quality of attention being paid, to the type of attention being paid, to how much attention is being paid by the viewer. The viewer could just
Right.
have something on, be paying about 10% attention, not really be thinking about it, doing something else. And that's given just as much priority by all algorithms as someone who is rapt, just watching something that enthralls them, something that is
Yeah.
changing their worldview. There's no measure of that whatsoever, and it makes a tremendous impact on everything about the relationship between the viewer and the media,
Right. Yeah.
and the market that mediates it.
Yeah. You see, this is what I love. I love going meta and into nuances instead of just like. I mean, I could never stand the life of just like going through the motions. It's like you search for meaning. You search for like what at the end of the day, like what is this proving or accomplishing, or are we like moving forward as a human species into our like happiness and understanding of the world, instead of just like, oh, we're just going to follow these stupid metrics off a cliff and never question them, you know.
I want to
Right.
kind of backtrack a little bit too, is that we were poking all around is something that I understand is collective or group narcissism. And that's
Mhm.
when it's not just the narcissist, but it's the followers of the narcissist, and who's following and why, and who's following
Oh.
in a negative positive sense, and then their relationship to each other, what
Oh
happens
yeah.
within group dynamics,
Of
and
course.
so when you say somebody's a cult, you got to kind of recognize like what is the leader kind of demanding of you, and
Yeah.
a true deep narcissist is going to put you through like loyalty tests and they're going to demonize people, whereas maybe a leader. So I liked Bernie. I just disagreed with him about the federal jobs guarantee without a basic income was my main beef. But as a leader, he's not really demanding that kind of authority or demanding loyalty. But the followers that are falling in behind are acting in that dynamic that kind of brought it in.
So
You know what I
there's,
mean?
I guess I can give you like a little bit of an inside view, and I think there were a lot of tensions within that movement, and you're going to see them kind of, if you're paying attention, play out in different ways. There's going to be, because under that you had like a mix of, I want to say, liberals who are heavily into the social justice, identity politics, and then you had people who were more like materialists and redistributionists, and then you had people that just kind of didn't like the Democratic Party but wanted to, like, find something between the Democrats and the Republicans, and all those groups kind of had an uneasy alliance. And now without Bernie, those are pretty frayed. And I mean, I think you probably, from what Shale's telling me, you can see a similar tensions within the Yang Gang playing out. But if Yang runs again, they might come back together. But there's definitely a way in which having a figurehead kind of consolidates a message and kind of creates a coalition that can be kind of fragile in their absence.
It's true, yeah. I mean, it's not that the Yang Gang is going anywhere, but it has frayed at the edges, and I've seen, maybe a quarter of us just vanish or, go silent, just leave in a huff due to infighting in the wake of this election. And a part of it's because some of us are just not natural allies anymore. Some people just were kind of here through this election, and then they don't feel like they resonate with the basic income with like top priority anymore. So
yeah, like some of you are really like pro Biden, others hate the guy, and
and not only that, but then like below the leader, then like there are these people who want to create a hierarchy, because I've seen this and it's everywhere. Like even if like two people agree with the doctrine of their philosophy, they'll have competitions with like who agrees more or who's more famous within that group to actually be deserving of time. Even though they're like diehards of the same exact thing they believe in, there's this idiotic infighting of like, let's do a purity test on you, or how many like followers do you have, or how well connected are you to within this group of like our shared ideologies that I should talk to you or not.
Well, I mean, that's the market, baby. It just always comes back to that. You're competing for scarce quantities of either money or attention,
even
or some
ideology,
combination.
which is like which is like which is like this intangible thing, but there's even a competition for the intangible. It's like, it's disgusting.
Well, I mean, social capital is can matter. It can help you find jobs, help you find sources of money.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a real thing people are fighting for, and ultimately, it's that scarcity mindset that
right. And then I guess in the absence of a leader, or the disillusion of the leader, it just ramps up.
Yeah, because you can kind of focus. The leader can give you like a short-term goal to just be like, all right, well, maybe I don't really like that guy or that woman, but at least we're fighting for the same thing, and we can kind of put that aside for now. But with that off the table, it's like, well, I mean, why am I dealing with this person anymore?
I just, like, people are so shallow. It's pathetic. Like they need to be herded like sheep. But if like we had like a movement of like critical thinkers, this shit would never happen, because like we all kind of like see past that, and we all say like, don't even need a leader. Like, this is the like a goal, and we can just kind of like accomplish that goal, and then we can all go our separate ways. But then people let all these petty things get in the way, and it's just really sad. Yeah.
Well, thinking is, there's also sort of a critical emotional intelligence, because like you can find people that are critical logitarians in a sense, but they miss information that is lying in other realms of intelligence. I liked Gardner's seven different intelligences, because critical thinking, what is it? Rhetorical thinking? Is it problem solving? Is it kinesthetic body learning? I mean, there's a lot of nuanced ways that intelligence manifests that stand outside like an academic, rhetorical framework.
Yeah, that's true. Like we have to look at all these different dimensions of things, and it's sad that kind of like like the schooling that we get in the West is all about like memorization and regurgitation. That is so useless for the rest of our lives, especially with the devices we have in our pockets. I mean, and then the breeding of competition. Except it's not money, it's grades, and it's being the gold star student, and being the employee of the month. So it's all like, oh, like, or being the teacher's pet, and then that just extends into the rest of people's lives with like, oh, getting the most hits and the most views and the most people listening to me, and like it's yeah.
Well, the thing I liked about UBI in particular is it kind of blunts the edges of anger, fear, frustration that happens from not having a solid existence or a feeling that you're secure. And I
Yeah.
think some of the extremist aspects of it you can't stop some people's way of thinking in that regard, but you can at least blunt the edges of the anger as well as deprivation. I tell you
Yeah, you
what,
can
deprivation,
mitigate it.
right? If you are in a society that lets you fail and steps over your body in the street, that deprivation is so traumatizing and wounding by itself that even if
Hmm.
you got back up to a level that was, sustainable, you will never forget that. And I look to the generations of people who went through the depression. You know, I learned a lot from my grandma who went through that, but it was on. There was some unusual things, some hoarding behaviors and some other things that,
Yeah.
and feeling that you're never good enough, or you could be thought of as never good enough, that never really
Right. Or,
lasts.
or even worse, like you're expendable. Like if tomorrow you didn't exist anymore, no one would care. And
Mhm.
that was the whole premise of the Joker movie, in fact.
Yeah, and
Like,
it can make you antisocial yourself because
oh
I
yeah,
mean, you have why are you going to invest in something that doesn't invest in you? You know,
right,
it's
right. And then they're like, oh, look at these people. They're so why do some people just want to watch the world burn? Well, look at what the world is doing to them. I'm sorry, but like
It probably
it's
got burned. Yeah.
yeah, you know. It's like, and then we wonder why we get, I'm sorry, like socios and thing. I'm not saying that of course there should be responsibilities for one's actions, of course, but when you're trying to get up and someone's kicking you while you're trying to get up on your feet, you're gonna you beat you want to shoot that guy. Joker movie.
yeah. No, I mean, there's a difference between excusing something and contextualizing it, and I think I wish
Right,
people would draw the line more often because
right.
most things don't happen in a vacuum, and it's
it,
not
it-
just they don't just happen because there are quote
right.
unquote good people and bad people.
Yeah.
There's
There's
conditions.
reasons, there's
Yeah.
conditions, there's environments, and that's the way I see, with like constantly having to think about your bills while you're trying to put a resume together or a portfolio together while you have bills to pay. It's like, on the one hand you're trying to get up on your feet, but on the other hand this foot's just coming and kicking you. It's like, excuse me, can you not kick me until I make something, and then after that, like, you know it's like when someone wants to get back up on their feet, you have to, like, give them a hand, and they take the hand and you pull them up. But if you see someone, like, trying to get up and you're just kicking that person, that's one of the most evil things on earth.
You know what
And
I'd like to see? I'd like to see because there's talks about deaths of despair and a lot, and I feel like people treat that as like code for like some kind of like white supremacist agenda because they're talking about people dying of meth addiction. But I would like to see that tied together, even with like inner city violence and whatnot, as that being another form of death of despair, and people just kind of universalize the concept of people engage in self-destructive and entropic behaviors when they're not invested and see no future.
Personally, I choose
Yeah.
a life of despair. See.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what the universal basic income does is give a platform to then do all the things society encourages you to do to compete and to succeed. If you don't even have that platform, and this is that big blind spot that and I wonder if it's because you feel that sense of competition, or you feel that sense of I gotta win is coming from not recognizing and realizing that the platform would have helped you back in the time that you had the deprivation, and the platform would help the other ones that you expect to do something to have the ability to do. And we're talking into a blind spot, and I'm really listening to what people say about how to overcome that.
I think that's the blind spot of the guest that we had on yesterday. But the good news is that like we kind of made them see that blind spot. As little as it was, at least like it's like peripheral vision when you're driving. You look ahead of you, but then you also look at the sides. It's like we're just helping these people who are there gain some peripheral vision. And if we just do that more, it'll be a big help. Because I mean, come on, like how many of us even heard of the idea of UBI before Andrew Yang even ran? So it's just a question of making people aware. But at the same time, to get people aware, it's like you need an infrastructure to do that, right?
And probably making aware does not necessarily include reacting, because I kind of learned the reactor is slave to the energy of the actor. So you're kind of locked in Mortal Kombat, so to speak. When you want to kind of take a breath, a beat, kind of back up and respond, which is a little bit different, because it's getting the message. A lot of times, sometimes you have to an antagonistic person, a technique to handle them is kind of broken record. You don't argue with them, you just say the thing, and that may not even affect the person you're talking to, but maybe observers. So the challenge is a lot of times when, like, I've been interested in the basic income since 2005 or 15, excuse me, and I didn't get involved in the Yang campaign. I was ill that year when he was running, so it was a little hard. I had to jump on the merry-go-round a little late here to join the Yang gang and participate. But the thing about it is there are arguments. It kind of feels like the same 10 freaking arguments over and over. Today I just kind of commented. I made a statement to a person who said that UBI was socialism, and I went, well, yeah, I was in the second row in an auditorium where Milton Friedman spoke, and he talked about the negative income tax, and it was like that was not that was a person interested in capitalism. It's just that they didn't do that part of it.
Yeah, the truth is, basic income isn't either socialist or capitalist inherently.
It's a whole new framework.
It's essentially it's just a function of
right
distribution and
it's
whatnot.
it's
You can
like
plug it
saying
into either system, really.
It's like saying, oh, electricity, is that fire or is that ice?
But funnily enough, some socialists really hate it because they think it is counterproductive to socialism. But but again, some capitalists hate it too. So
So it's a platform that you can stand on your right leg or your left leg, or the right side or the left side, but it's a platform.
It's just Well, I mean, like that's because we have so low creativity. I don't know. We have such a lack of vision with some people. They're so stuck in like the old way of thinking, and like they're the last ones to kind of like maybe even get a computer. I don't know. So it's like, oh, the internet is socialism because it allows me to like do all this stuff without paying for each and everything that I do. Oh, it's socialized.
A
Yeah.
lot of times people are stuck in that group narcissistic sense of that it's
Mhm.
literally going to be a factor of if they leave, they will be considered the most hated thing that the group hates. And that dynamic is very challenging to overcome emotionally and maybe even where you live and how you fare as a person. When you step
Right.
out, you're an exile. You're an
I mean,
exile and
it's
cut off.
like a group think. That's like very very toxic. And people all the time side with ideology instead of more practicality. Like they'll vote for something that actually like doesn't improve their life and doesn't help them, and
Yeah,
they take other people with them. But it's all like, oh, but I believe in this thing. Yeah.
yeah. There's a large degree to which ideology is really a trap, and it
Mhm.
becomes self-sustaining.
Mhm.
Um, God, I think Slavoj Žižek refers to it as eating out of the trash can of ideology,
Mhm.
and it's definitely. I think there are.
And there's also habit, right? So like even if you gave a person a lot of money or a better house or better circumstances, they're used to not having that, and their comfort zone is to have bad circumstances because they're comfortable with complaining and not taking any responsibility. So it's like if we did pass a UBI and their lives didn't improve, I don't know, maybe it's like, oh, like they don't they want to have that excuse of like, oh, well, I can never things will never work and I can never do better for myself, so I'm just going to perpetuate that. So I don't want to be proven wrong. But it's like if you are proven wrong, your quality of life will go up. Well, I don't care. I just don't want to be proven wrong. It's,
I really tend to attribute more emotional things than often are looked at because it's not
Mhm.
ideology. Sometimes they don't even believe all the stuff that's being said. It's just that they are hooked in emotionally and relationships and family and a sense of
Mhm.
family and community that is actually very challenged in our society. Our sense of community is so much tied up with identity that
Right.
we don't because general community is kind of dwindled into commercial community.
Right, right. And then that kind of toxifies everything else when like family relationships become transactional and like getting help from friends and like we live like there it's like it's not transactional with like your children. Well, I mean even some people when their children is transactional, even if those children are like 7, 8 years old. It's like, oh, I'll give you the cookie if you do this or that. But at the same, but the fundamentals when, of like babies is like, no, you provide everything. It's not transactional because you provide that foundation at a young age, and then later it's going to be transactional. But like, but like healthy, wholesome relationships of like actually enjoying someone's company are usually not transactional. Let's just say that.
Yeah, because there's going to be times when one person can give a lot more than the other, and
Right.
expecting always things to kind of be perfectly, like fee for service in one way or another, it ultimately sets you up for disappointment and
Right.
inability to continue. And
And in an inability to have something deeper.
right. And
You know.
obviously, it's different if the person would, even if they had the ability, would not help you. But that's
Hmm.
sometimes they may or may not, and you have to take that into account.
Right. but I mean, but yeah.
The quality of relationships, I think, would improve a lot again with that platform because, so for instance, if you're a teacher, your job is to work yourself out of a job. The best teachers are going
Mm-hmm.
to let that student go on and do whatever and not
Mm-hmm.
expect that a direct trade-off. But if you remove the platform, then the precarity causes the nature of any exchange to be colored with the fear of not
Oh yeah,
surviving.
like the same. I think same thing for therapist, right?
Yes.
Like a good therapist would want the client to like not be in therapy anymore because it's like, well, you've figured out all these problems and you've moved on. I mean that's the thing. I mean like if a cocoon charged the caterpillar to become a butterfly and it was working on a capitalist transactional model, it would never want the caterpillar to become a butterfly because it would stop getting paid.
Yeah, and we don't have the just baseline basis of supportive community. Again, that's putting edges and challenges to something that should be very,
Right.
an assumption of goodwill. And again, that deprivation experience really hit, makes you feel that there isn't goodwill toward you. And now we have
Right.
a lot of angry people as a result. And it's going to get worse as the supports. I mean, there's literally people now showing up to food banks have never been to one before. And that's because of the situation that COVID's pushed us into. It's almost like we got pushed so far over the edge. We're going to need to, there's not going to be any philosophical discussion of some real needs based stuff, more of a recognition of a platform and that
Mhm.
there has been before. It's a good opportunity for us if we survive.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, that, a lot of these problems need to not be abstract for people to really start engaging with them. And if you're
Mhm.
not able to uh, put food on your plate, that's a big motivator.
Right. Yeah.
I
And
came.
and then
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, and I mean like how about like a person like her, like when like let's say something happened and she couldn't put food on her plate, is she really gonna play all this like identitarian stuff or look for the damn food?
Well,
That's
that's a
all.
good thing that I kind of go to because I came from a family of a lot of Irish that like to debate. But then ultimately, you have to get down to, okay, bippity boppity boo, is everyone taken care of?
Mm-hmm.
Because if that's not in the place for everyone, it's not going to be in the place for just you or your group. There has to
Mm-hmm.
be that platform, and then that is not going to get rid of all problems, prejudices, or evil behavior either. That
Mm-hmm.
will give the basis for it to be solved rather than you're trying to solve little problems like you're beating at the branches of the
But
weed, but
but but I mean it's a work in progress.
Well, that's why
Uh.
I think having a universalist attitude or a
Mm.
goes a long way towards forcing people to have to resolve some of their worst prejudices to because you can't if your allies are people who maybe you have some prejudice towards but you ultimately still need them to achieve your goal, you're holding on to the high levels of that prejudice is going to be counterproductive. It's going to hurt you as well as them. And I think we underestimate how much that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we haven't
Yeah.
seen it. That's part of the problem is we've not even seen what that's even like to
Well,
have
I
that
mean, we
platform.
have to go back to the early 20th century to really see what that looks like.
Yeah, and tribal cultures, that had the potlatch system, where everyone's benefiting and the one who's the most important is the one who gives the most, not has the most. So we haven't, but in terms of us having a direct experience with it, we've always been playing without a net. And it's okay if you never have to need the net, but then we've got so many people that are. It seems like it should get obviouser that we need a,
Yeah,
a
I mean,
big
that's the That's part of the problem is I think just about everybody who remembers how how that works is either extremely old or gone at this point. We just have kind of been stuck in this like Reagan-esque paradigm for 40 years, and I think uh, everything is so individualized that even now when people are trying to resolve those issues, it's from like a narcissistic perspective of, oh, my, this is my identity, this is your identity, and whereas in the if you go back to like the labor movement, it was like, all right, well, we all have to secure the bag, and uh, yeah, it's just a very different approach, and I don't know how to get people on that same page, but I think it definitely involves having a common goal.
I think what I've kind of personally done as a philosophy is just reset my own thinking to remind myself there are still a lot of people who simply haven't heard about it or heard a good simple elevator speech about it or even a dissertation. So go back to first principles and talk about it and say what it is. And the objections, really, a lot of times there's even people who have objections at first and then they think about it some more. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like inform rather than concern yourself with convince like we're used to
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Right. And yeah.
So just keep informing. This is what this is. And maybe like I did today with that tweet, just say, no, this is what I saw. This is what I know. Without getting real emotionally invested whether that person, like, I'm going to argue with them,
No.
because there's the arguments coming from fear and anger and hatred, but at the root of it is the fear and deprivation, or they didn't get enough somewhere to where they assume a scarcity, or they've
Yeah, that's what I've
experienced
seen.
nothing but scarcity. you know there's plenty of people who are having great difficulty with their financial stuff. There's whole regions that have third world level poverty. What's missing is the feedback loop. Is to have the top realize it's connected to the rest of the pyramid. It's the pyramid midian, which is the top of the pyramid, depends on it. And we're pushing that so far that of them not realizing they're dependent, that we're getting to the point where there will be consequences for that will be palpable to that level.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
anticipate if you go into supply side long enough, it cracks, because it's breaking the first law of exchange, supply and demand. And if you don't have a demand side, then what you have is not of worth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, and it's just like it's just over time. I think that's all it is. I mean, they say like the wind, like it took years and years, but the wind actually like made the mountains because it cut through rock. And that's like a really, really long process, but eventually it's just gonna have to get there. And it's just a matter of like how bad things have to get. I hope not that bad, but uh yeah.
That seems to have been the American way. Run it into the ground before you make
Right.
change.
Well, wasn't that what Churchill says?
You can always
Americans will
count on Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other possibility.
That seems
right.
to be a trait, yeah.
Yeah.
And but I mean, I would like to think, and I do think that there's an immense disruption and end game of supply side right now, with rampant inequality enough to affect them, as well as you know the fact that it's failed in so many ways by any kind of measure. And it does run on confidence, consumer confidence, for instance, and it's losing that
hmm
confidence. So I think what startles people is the presentation of UBI kind of startles them, because it's something they may have not ever heard before. But like I said, inform. To a lot of people, so a lot of us probably kind of got it in a couple of minutes, versus all the resistance that happens. But what they're saying isn't true. The extremist worldview is rooted back a ways. It's not rooted in the right now. And then it just becomes obvious and obviouser and obviouser. And then their arguments, you move, if you're left, right, or this, that argument, the way out of that is the next thing or forward or, the third thing.
But actually, I read like what John Adams said about political parties, and it was pretty spot on. Let me just make sure. He said, "There's nothing I dread so much as a division of the republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This is my humble apprehension is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution." Surprise, we did it.
What's interesting about our parties, though, is that they're kind of not really parties if you compare them to like most other nations that have some kind of republic or democratic element. Because like you could ask like what's really the ethos of either party, and if you lay it out, they're not particularly distinct. They're just like a collection of different lobbies and influences. There's not, and you don't need to pay a fee to join them. They're just this weird kind of loose framework for running for office. And you could just be nobody and then just suddenly say, all right, today I'm a Democrat and I'm running for office. I mean, like even Andrew Yang, he doesn't have a great history of being in politics. He just kind of was like, all right, I'm going to run as a Democrat. It's an interesting system we have, and I don't love it, but it is pretty weird in its way.
Yeah, it's pretty sad that like we don't have more dynamism and creativity and divergent ways of thinking. It's a paradigm lock. It can do you in. It's just like and it's always the person who has the better idea or saw what was wrong that's only acknowledged after their death. It's like, oh, they had it all right all along, and it's like, yeah, but those people back then, didn't understand. So I mean, don't get it wrong. I mean, we're still in the dark ages.
We love martyrs because they're not around anymore to like actually lead their movements. So you can kind of just fold them into whatever your current philosophy is. I mean, Martin Luther King's kind of like the archetypical example of that, where everybody quotes him, despite having completely contradictory and antagonistic political views with each other, with him. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Sheesh. Oh, I see that Faye join us.
Hi, Faye.
Mike. Yeah. And it's really interesting. But I think what we did yesterday really was very productive, even if it didn't get all recorded, because it was a step in the right direction, because the one thing that needs to happen is that whoever figures out how to get out their echo chamber and actually like have constructive dialogue with like an opposing view is gonna win this thing. And Yang, like the Yang movement, is only like 2 years old. Damn, I mean, Biden ran for president ever since I was born. Look how long that took. His first presidential run was in 1988, and my birth year was 1988. So there you go. Right. Takes a while.
Yang's in his policy list was able to hit on a lot of long form and short form, trends, and put them in a very concise way, which I think set off people. If they're, a lot of times people really react to something they've not exactly heard before. And, the arguments are very unsophisticated against UBI. I mean, they're not like the one about it causing inflation at a time when we have rampant deflation
Right.
because of technology, which is the upper crust people that want to make some money are very distraught about deflation because they can't get their investments to go and their the interest that they would get go up to past a certain level. So and people that make that argument should be way more afraid that people decide they're not going to spend. Quite a few people took the stimulus and just kept it and didn't spend it because they're afraid to, because they don't know where the threat matrix is coming from.
Well, yeah, like I've been like a saver for years. I was just saving because like when you keep applying for work and you don't know why, like, you haven't landed anything yet, you just tend to save. And it really sucks because I want to do fun stuff. I mean, I travel a lot, but like, what, like I had fun, like I save, and then I go traveling and I really enjoy it. But this is disgusting. I mean, like when you don't know, like, that everything is coming out and nothing's coming in. That's not
You go
fun.
way more cautious, and I don't know if you could call a one-time payment really a stimulus, because the effectiveness of the stimulus would be in a UBI that's periodic and you can count on it. That gives you confidence and that changes your spending habits.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
So it's
pretty
not really a stimulus. And I remember the 300. I don't know if you guys remember the
Right.
$300 stimulus, but right at the time that went out, all the gas companies jacked up the price of gas, and it went into everybody's tank to get to work, pretty much.
And the thing is like, okay, then why doesn't the electric bill just say, okay, you only pay one time and you're done? For cable,
I
just
think
one
that's one of
time.
the more common arguments against UBI is that the ownership class will ultimately capture all the money by inflating prices, and
Well,
it definitely is a concern I'd have. Although I obviously I don't think it's a good reason to not
Right.
redistribute
Well, they're
money.
doing that anyway.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, there's the whole thing of like setting prices according to like what they think people can pay, which technically I think is collusion, but we don't really
Right.
regulate anything.
Yeah, well, they're doing that anyway. I mean, aren't they? I mean, it's just like, yeah.
Well, just by like that you have food stamps, it's going to create a demand for that one particular industry or thing. There's a dispersion effect that happens if you don't tell people what to spend, or you spend it for them. So a lot of people on the benefits programs are the ones making a deal in a sense of what things are going to cost. If that situation went to an actual full free enterprise base that they keep talking about, the negotiation would be with individuals, not with large groups. So, for instance, why we pay too much for medicine is because the big companies do not do anything to make it in a way that it's diffused. The demand is diffused to a certain
like
extent.
here I just had an idea. Why should collective bargaining just be with unions? Why can't like a neighborhood council get together and kind of like say, this seems reasonable for like a price to pay on this, and like who's doing well and who's not doing so well, so we can like adjust accordingly, and then as like a power of like a neighborhood to come together
I think
and
that
demand
does
fair prices.
exist in a few isolated cases. I want to say Chinatown and Manhattan kind of functions like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I did some reading on it, but like there's kind of almost like a co-op style real estate market there, and it's kind of why they've managed to not be completely like gentrified out of existence.
Interesting.
Individualized bargaining. This is one of the reasons why I think the unions are really missing an opportunity not to grab onto UBI, because it enhances collective bargaining. If people have, poverty as a chip on the side of the, oppressors, so to speak, then they have no agency. You have to have some amount of agency, and individual bargaining would
Yep.
support bargaining, or be important for that one person. So maybe that person goes to the union to say, hey, like a lot of women did, there's a sexual harassment problem, and the unions wouldn't take it on. And it took lawsuits and a lot of pushing to finally get them to recognize that as something that needed to be collectively bargained as well, to make sure that that didn't happen. If that didn't happen in your particular case and it was really bad, you could go say, I'm going to say no to this toxic environment, and I'm going to go do something better for myself if the collective bargaining does not support my individual issue.
So I came by to let you know that I'm going to start the Twitch stream for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the button now. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So
Thank
good
you, Faye.
point on.
Mm-hmm.
See.
Without
yeah,
the individual platform, then I think people gravitate to groups that may not completely represent them, but don't feel they can move past them. So
and
if
really,
if your group says, hey, we don't want UBI, you have to go with that because that's your group, rather than having it be your choice.
right. And we also have, like, in this country, an extremely dysfunctional relationship with money. On one hand, we get advertising telling us, like, buy this, buy that, blah blah blah, and on the other hand, like, the subject of money is like taboo. Like, parents don't want to tell their kids, and, like, it's kept under the rug, and the only thing that school tells you about it is that you just get it through working a job, and, like, it's not nice to ask, how much. And yeah, school just says, like, you work for money, and, like, don't want too much of it, because then it's just going to seem like you're obnoxious or something like that. Like, that is the extent of our financial education in the schooling system. Like you're studying all this stuff, so one day you can just work, and then your boss is going to give you money, and that's all you need to know. Like, it's so pathetic. It's so, like, thing. And then and we never get into the nuance. I mean, like, the only thing I remember in, like, ninth grade math is, like, figuring out principal and interest, and, like, putting that all together. That was basically it. But we're never told, like, okay, like, that this is how, like, a boss is going to value you more, or, like, this is how this, painter or something makes passive income, or, like, this is how that. It's just like, oh, you just work for it, and you work hard, and you just got to pass all these tests and quizzes to make it, and you're good. And then if you go to college, you're just gonna earn so much more, and end of story.
I like Andrew Yang making the point that it's important to learn financial literacy, but you got to have some financial money in order to learn the literacy.
Right.
If it's going straight toward the bare necessities, there's not enough there to invest, to socially interact.
Yeah,
A lot of things.
I mean, it's just like riding a bike. Just imagine if, like, you went to school, and you read, like, 15 textbooks about how to ride a bike. You learned about the history of bikes, who was the first person to make a bike, and, like, how was the bicycle made, and, like, what ideas they had, but you never actually got a bike.
You don't have, that's experiential learning. You have to have
Right.
the
I don't
basis and
know.
the platform for the experience to be instructive.
I don't know why the hell our schools are so focused on like not having experiential learning. The first thing to go away when they're having like these, quote unquote budget cuts is the experiential learning in favor of the textbook style. And I'm just like, it's like, wow, who are the idiots in charge of the system?
It's always important to ask, cui bono, who benefits? Who benefits by there being rhetorically trained, unexperienced populace? Who benefits by that system? You get an obedient person who can sit at a desk and fill out forms. Well, that fits a certain type of work, a type of business that benefits from there being obedient desk slaves.
Yeah, right, 100%. And that just perpetuates, like because if like in school how we're told like not to socialize and not to make friends when it's like class time, but like the upper class net worth people are all about schmoozing and knowing how to schmooze. We can't have the slaves learning that. Oh my god.
We didn't get schmooze literacy. We need schmooze literacy.
Right. Yeah, and for introverts it's really not that, easy sometimes, and like some people, but the thing is that like, we always get told we're like in this meritocracy when there are thousands of stories of just people just, you know, going on Easy Street because they had a likable personality to someone who had a lot of money. They didn't write any essays or like, fill out any research papers. And then they're the ones who like did all the essays and did all the research papers and did all the, grunt work to just be trapped in like a wage slavery job to some, and then they look at that other person who just had who could just be funny and who just had an interesting personality being picked up by some rich guy and whatever, you know.
Minion training. How to be a minion.
Right, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I know like I've watched myself struggle and other people struggle with how to talk to somebody who is kind of locked in that framework, and for my own blood pressure, probably not engage too much. I'm trying to be very relaxed, and what this is what I saw or this is what I felt. I can't tell them how to feel, how they're supposed to feel if I
Right.
haven't had that experience, so I shouldn't even try. But
Mhm.
instead just say, well, this is what I saw, this is how I felt, this is what I think,
Yeah.
and do the inform, you know, and then what happens after that is their responsibility. And I'm listening. That's one thing, is you have to have some active listening. But sometimes when you're listening to somebody, they're kind of self-referential, and it's hard to get a handle on where we could have a commonality or see each other's humanity and stuff. And
Mhm.
I have in the past tried to be very empathetic, but realized that that's probably not working for them because of their perception of me. So I don't really know. I don't really want to engage them in a way that is me telling them like how they think, what they saw, and what they feel.
Right. Yeah, yeah. You don't want to do that. Although like a lot of parents and teachers try and do that, and it's extremely offensive, but they just think it's okay because that person is younger.
Well,
And yeah.
well, taking care of my disabled daughter was a big lesson in my life, and a couple things I got out of it. One of it is that everyone has abilities and disabilities, and if you don't think you have some blind spots and disabilities, that is your disability.
Right.
You're kind of not connected in a way that is allowing for. And again, it's back to that platform thing. So I'm trying to write down a little mini philosophy for these encounters for myself of saying, okay, I'm listening, but also I want you to have universal basic income and health care and some things and housing. I want you to have it. I want everyone to have it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll offend anyone or not, but
Yeah,
that's
it's it's this culture in the US where it's like, oh, I don't want a handout, like a thing, but it's like, okay,
okay.
if the UBI is opt out, I don't care, opt out, but don't let that attitude, like don't shove that attitude down other people's throats who need help or who just need a hand up. It's none of your business what other people like want or don't want or things like that. If you say you don't want a handout and you want to do the whole bootstraps thing, be my guest. You know what? I'll fly you out into the middle of the Amazon forest with no clothes and parachute you in there, and you're welcome to just take care of yourself. I don't care. Leave other people out of it.
Oh, well, a lot of people can't anticipate what can happen to them. They can't anticipate aftermath. I mean, maybe COVID is kind of showing that is the aftermath is what that's for. That's what's going to help you if you made a set of circumstances that you didn't anticipate. And so I don't really know people who say that I don't want a handout and I don't want anyone else to hand out. That's a person who has not experienced a major setback. If
Right.
they've experienced one, then they would know what that platform or that net was for.
Well, you know what's ironic? Like a lot of Trumpers are like, no communism, no people getting handouts, people have to work. Look at your damn leader. He's been having a handout since the day he was born. You know?
The infrastructure is assumed and supplemented though, because the infrastructure of them having a road to drive to their job. There's a lot of things that support a job even being created.
Yeah,
Right.
and society itself is a mutual handout of two sorts. There's
Hey, you guys, language.
Something you can do is, I've startled people by saying, okay, well, what we're going to do, since you don't want a handout, is we're going to put a toll booth in your driveway. And every time you drive in and out of your driveway, you're going to be driving on public roads. Therefore, you should be, paying your fair share.
Right. You didn't build that road. Why should you be driving on it? Did you make that house with your own hands? No. Why should you be using? Did you create the technology it uses to make the?
You better be living like a pioneer, because a lot of things that you would be depending on the infrastructure that you built there wouldn't be metal to make metal stuff with.
Right.
There would, all the things that you need that comes from modernity and not nature.
Right. And it's like we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. The people in the past who invented tech and aviation and cars and all this stuff. It's like the humanity's throughout the years, like we didn't do that ourselves. We didn't create that ourselves, and it's like these are like generational multi-generational handouts for all of us.
Social inheritance, which is something early UBI people talked about, the commons, the loss of the commons, and also social inheritance, what we have inherited from previous generations, it collectively as something that been privatized and then damaged.
Right. But then like we have these imaginary, these pieces of paper in our wallets and these pieces of plastic and these numbers and something called an account. And then it's like, oh, that means that like I've earned, this iPhone that I didn't help to create, or I have no idea how it's being created. But it wasn't like a thing that it's like I earned it because I gave these pieces of paper. No. You didn't work to like create that thing or do that. You just happen to have these pieces of paper in your pocket or this card in your hand. But that that you did not earn having that. It's just an exchange of, you know, money. How can I say, right? Yeah. So it's like, you know, it it's like you, like the people who created like helicopters, like I think a lot of them died because you know, it's a very volatile machine. But then some rich kid with an inheritance can just like buy one, and it's like, but how many years went into like the hard work went into like the creation of that, and how many people like died in the early days trying to fly it, but they didn't put that sweat equity into that stuff. It was just, you know, exchange for money. Yeah, yeah.
I remember
It's just
reading up
crazy.
on an account of the invention of the parachute, and it's kind of, you know, they didn't have parachute crash test dummies. They had, you know, volunteers and convicted criminals, and basically were able to gauge the effectiveness by whatever transpired during the, you know, drop. And
Nah.
you know, so that's an intellectual inheritance that we got, but it was very, very high cost. And so yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
the extremeness of defending yourself sort of blocks out the realization how interdependent that you are. So there is
Right.
a threat matrix that they're feeling.
Yeah. Same thing with the, you know, taming of the West. I mean, as you might say, like all this infrastructure was built before you were born. You know, I mean, damn it, the elevator, the escalator, stairs. Yeah, it's like that's all like a social inheritance. You know.
Always bugged me about supply side viewpoint and definition is an assumption that the like a business cycle starts with a capitalist making a business versus a customer needs something that they're willing to pay for. We've had a shift to have it all be about job creators and deregulation and tax relief instead of
Yeah.
remembering that it is somebody who needs something that they're willing to pay for, that starts the process. And I'd hate us to have a hard lesson in that with a very deep depression level of economic stress because we
What's
didn't realize
crazy
it starts.
is that we've already had that lesson in 2008. You know, we actually had a period of deflation. It was fairly brief, but I mean, it was the first I think we've really had since the Depression, where you actually had fewer, not enough dollars chasing too many goods instead of the opposite. And I think if we go into another depression like now, you're going to see the same thing where you can have all the goods you want, but you know there's just no liquidity for people to buy them, and there's a certain tragedy to that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what COVID's shoving us into is a very large swath of the population. And this was hard for me to think about, but I know Andrew Yang was right when he said that of the people losing their jobs to COVID, a very large percentage, 40 to 50%, are never going to work again. And that was harsh to hear. And if I was someone losing that job, I'd feel really bad. But the fact of the matter is that there's this term, forced automation, that was written up by the Fed. It's a report in the Fed. You can look it up. And it's saying that, as most of us would probably guess, that the COVID situation is accelerating automation even faster than people thought it would happen from before COVID, and are in fact forced to do it to protect supply lines and production. And so
That's
he's done. He's right. He's absolutely right about that.
I'm like, it would just like be a interesting irony if when I was canvassing for Yang and the person I was telling it to was like one of those, oh, I have something, it's called a job. And then that happened to that person. Serves you right, jerk.
You can
Sorry.
look that up. There's a website, willrobotstakemyjob.com, and you can put in your job, and it'll give you a percentage of how quickly the robots are coming down your street, basically.
Right. No, and I don't blame the robots. More power to the robots for, making our lives better and easier. It's not the robots, it's the mentality of the asshats that we have in power. I mean, like, I sometimes
It's a
I just
matter of
can't.
robot ownership. I mean,
Right,
if
exactly.
you're not
And
owning the robots, then you're not. Then
right,
robots are a very
and
bad thing for you. But
right,
if you do own them, they're amazing.
right, and it's like these geriatrics who don't understand, and they're all in positions of power. I'm like looking up like the people in our Congress and the people in our Senate, and I'm seeing 60, 70, 80. It's like, God damn it. Where the hell? 30, 40, like 45. Where are you? It's infuriating. You know?
Never underestimate old age and treachery beating youth and exuberance. It's a saying. They're figured out ways to protect themselves and to stay in power and
Well,
to
yeah.
build a kingdom
Well,
within the government.
I mean, they got a head start. It's easy to do that. I mean, it's the same thing as like taking the elevator up to the penthouse and then blowing it up and then making everybody like climb through the shaft. You just like the person who gets there first is always going to have the advantage. But that's just obvious. you know. It's
The ones
like,
in that
yeah.
upper position do need to realize their dependencies on a lower position. That's been being obfuscated by economic policy, but chickens
Mhm.
will come to roost. Maybe not on that generation. It might be the generation after where they realize they should have done something. Did you guys see that the Koch brother? I forgot the first name of the one that's still alive.
Charles, I think.
Regretting,
Charles.
yeah, regretting the division in the country. Really?
Yeah,
Well,
I was like, what? He literally also just this last cycle like spent tons of money on the Republicans. Like I don't know what. It's PR. I think like
well, I mean,
he's
he
getting what he paid for.
yeah, he might as well use it as toilet paper if it was for Trump. But I guess he got his return on investment, like what happened with the Senate. But I mean, the biggest, blow kick to his balls would be if we got those two in Georgia and we actually get something done. Yeah, it's just so gross. I mean, like, it's funny. I watched this Scooby Doo meme, and he's like, "I'm beginning to think that the only true monsters are these old white men who just want to keep on to their power."
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of people with money and investment in the way things are right now, and they have no incentive to want to change.
We just have to outsmart them somehow. I mean, if we just mobilize the good amount of energy somewhere with, really, really like quality people with like quality intelligence, and we kind of like created some kind of conglomerate. I don't know. We'll have a real
Typically,
fighting
people like that have to be convinced it's in their best interest. That's
chance.
pretty much the only way.
Right.
And, they will move if a particular direction goes intense enough, they'll move harder than faster than most people could. But I mean, I don't know. I know that it probably seems to be a truth self-evident. It's like I feel like UBI is like a freaking army knife, Swiss Army knife. It seems
Right.
to impinge itself on a lot of different situations and a lot of different outlooks.
Right.
If I was I'm getting ready to do a graphic along those lines, just
Well,
because
yeah,
of
that's
how
why
it.
Scott Santens put out that article, when Bruce Lee said be like water,
Yeah.
you like change to whatever thing. UBI is liquid infrastructure. It's
It's kind of like if you watch that Terminator movie and there was that like liquid metal thing and he can just like shape shift. It's that. It's like it can just shape, you know, like shape shifting is an amazing ability because it's like just turn into whatever, fits the thing. And like, rigidity is one of the worst qualities ever because you can break. But if you're not rigid and you're like flexible, like that's what we need. We need more flexibility with everything, with our ideologies, our politics, and all this stuff. That's the way of the future. So Shale, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I just hang on a second.
Oh, okay, sure. I was thinking like we should do the BLM guy, whoever it was, or we try and get him on.
Yeah, the I forget his name. Was it Hawthorne? Someone who Jeremy said was one of the people who got UBI added to the Black Lives Matter list of demands, I think, or is that
right?
If I'm remembering correctly, is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that would be great. I would love to have him on.
Yeah, let's see what we can do with that because like as painful as it not her, but like and then we need to invite more like anti-UBI people on and
Yeah.
put the screws to them like we did with
I don't know
her.
if putting the
because I
screws
think-
to them is the best framework for winning hearts and minds.
No. Like, well, I mean, in
have a conversation, you know?
Yeah, and then but we don't. You never need. You don't need to put the screws to someone in a way that's like,
Think about it this way. Ariel.
like attacking them.
Yeah, not. She probably had in her mind she's going to put the screws to us, right, before she came on our show. And how did that go for her?
Right. Yeah.
So like, you don't want that kind of confrontational attitude right out of the gate. I don't know. Maybe you do.
But I didn't mind. I didn't mind.
Maybe I'm talking to myself. Really.
Okay. So how about
Yeah.
like let's get people who think that they're putting their screws to us, and let's do the reverse Uno card, and that'll be good.
Would just like to very directly convince people with like, no ulterior motive whatsoever, other than my only motive is like I want them to see how this actually benefits them.
Like look at this though, Shale, as like a case study. When Andrew Yang met like Fred the Felon, and Fred the Felon thought like, oh, another one of these like dumb liberals who just want to like give people free stuff and not give a damn about the economy. And then when Yang eloquently like explained everything to Fred became one of his biggest fans and like drove a freaking trailer with his name on it, with his ideas on it, like all across this country.
Yeah, I know. It's a matter of having the patience for both parties to have the patience and like the interest to stay engaged long enough to get to the bottom of their disagreement before they get angry at each other.
I love doing that.
Yeah, but usually someone walks away before we get there. But sometimes you do get there.
Well, she didn't.
No, she was good.
Yeah,
You have to be prepared to lose frequently.
Yeah,
is really what it is, and be okay.
But I think, but she said she's 50% more for it, and if it was on the ballot, and if she could like support Yang, and I really think she was being genuine. So
possibly, it's one of those things. She's going to go back to her echo chamber, and maybe someone will talk her out of it again.
Yeah.
Or maybe she'll go to the echo chamber and she'll bring our arguments. You never know.
Right. She's still in contact with Faye. You know, and but I think that's the beauty of like watching people change their minds when there's probably something they didn't know before, or they just got exposed to a new piece of evidence that they didn't know was there.
I think that interaction you described between Andrew Yang and Fred the Felon says just as much about Fred as it does about Andrew. I mean, Andrew can convert people to his way of thinking by being so, I think Andrew's trick is that he allows you to feel like you are thinking about it, and he is just providing you the information.
Right.
And he is just so easy to talk to in that way, that because he doesn't have any sort of judgment on people. But on the other hand, Fred is a very special person, and I think that we cannot always expect to have that kind of conversion rate.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah,
I mean, I
that's-
will
that's-
say this: the difference between Fred and Ella yesterday is that Fred, economically, who he is, stands to benefit much more from a UBI actually than people who are in Ella's position. People who make a comfortable upper
Well,
middle class living through connections to big institutions and clout don't benefit from UBI as much as every other class. Like poor
Yeah,
people
that's-
directly benefit. Rich people who own businesses directly benefit because poor people spend more money. Comfortable upper middle class, institutionally rich people, the white glove, I forget the white,
Professionals,
yeah,
essentially, what you're
the
saying,
professional
but-
class
yeah.
are the
I think it's
enemies of
really
UBI
unfair
because they
of us to
economically
talk-
don't benefit.
I
Like
think
what they do is they become closer to the working class, is elevated closer to them, and they feel threatened, and that's why they're pushing back with everything they
Well, the
have.
reason I'm trying to interrupt you is because I think that it's unfair of us to talk about her while she's not here,
Well, no,
especially because only 30 minutes of her
her
podcast
as a
was available
proxy
to
for
anybody.
the class. I'm talking about her class. I'm saying that her view
No,
aligns
I
with
think
her
we really
economic
shouldn't talk
incentives.
about our guests after the fact,
Okay.
especially
I'm
when
not
they're
ta-
not here to defend themselves.
I'm not
or
talking
to
specifically about her, though.
We
I'm
may
saying that her view is
misrepresent
supported by
something
her
that-
class.
Well, like I don't know. Shia, sometimes I think you're a little too pessimistic, man.
Okay. That's
The-
fine.
This is only 2 years that
Yeah,
like Andrew has been running, and when I told her that Andrew took a big bite out of like Trump's base into thing, I think we're making a little too many assumptions, because I'm sure there are some wealthy people out there that don't mind that other people just do a little bit better.
No.
I mean, she
Right.
was talking
But what I'm
about
saying,
wanting a war against Bezos.
but I'm not
for
talking
instance.
about wealthy people. I'm talking about upper middle class people specifically.
Oh, you're talking about okay.
So it's
but
easier to convince wealthy people of the benefit of UBI because they actually do benefit more than upper middle class people or anyone else, or lower middle class people, or working class people, or poor people.
Also, I don't
Everyone
wanna
benefits more than the actual opponents, who are the culture warriors who say we need culture change. Let's have that instead of UBI.
Also, I don't want to make a moral judgment against her because I don't think she's acting
Yeah.
irrationally.
And Faye, I'm not talking about specifically Ella. I'm just talking about the class she belongs to.
You can't say that after you actually use the word Ella, and we know exactly who we're speaking about. So if you want to talk about a certain class, let's talk about that.
That's
Let's
what I'm
not
talking
bring
about.
up prior guests when she's not here to defend herself, or what she said, or how she feels,
Well, no,
That's-
yeah.
or
what
even
we're
what
doing?
class she belongs to.
Well,
I mean, we
I'm-
can make some assumptions based on, like Twitter or something like that.
I just give her major props for.
I feel
coming
really
here.
sad that we lost the
Feel
rest of
okay.
that conversation.
I
yeah?
do too. It was a
I'm so
great
sorry that,
conversation. It was
yeah.
difficult to have, and I really wish we could have, saved it all. At least we have the first half
But-
hour. But
I mean,
Yeah. We
It's a
just
work-
really, I would love to have her back, and I think that if I knew that somebody was talking about me later, I may not want to return. So I would
okay,
love
I
for
hear you. I
and
hear
maybe
you.
have a similar conversation.
But that whole thing again was
Yeah.
not about particularly Ella. It was about the
So-
class that she represents, that she belongs to.
but how do we know? that
Possibly,
she
I think she might characterize it a different way, which is why I think we can maybe just talk about class
Point
without
taken. I
inserting
will
her.
drop it.
Well,
Thank
how
you
do
so
we-
much.
Yeah. But we don't know what her net worth is and stuff.
Well, it's not really about net worth. And again, let's get off of her. But like, it's about essentially a certain amount of prestige and ability to manage people. That is a motivating factor within a lot of the professional class, the professional middle class. And I think
Oh, okay.
there's a reason why you're having an easier time talking to both like poor people and rich people than you are that middle stratum, which
middle
actually
manager people.
resists you far more, and that's it's definitely something I see pretty commonly play out in discussions, not just on here but elsewhere. And again, that's why I'm saying it's not about an individual, because I think individuals in general follow what they perceive to be their own interests, and that's human. Yeah.
Right. It's just a
I think
matter.
it's true that if you have a certain profession, for example, if you are a teacher, or if you've been hired to do certain types of jobs, if you're a social worker, or if you're a policeman, like it depends on what you've been told your value lies in, protecting people from criminals or whatever. And that's going to determine what kinds of value you're going to adopt, because it makes you feel good, right, to have that value. And so I think Shale had mentioned that before at some point, that it gives you a sense of worth when you can when you identify that this is your group and this is your purpose in life. But then it also creates sort of your it creates barriers to you understanding the other group. So if you're going to be an officer of the law, obviously you're going to take sides, right? You can't just be like
Yeah.
so I think it's the same thing if you're a middle manager, or if you're a teacher. I mean, if you're a teacher, you must think that education is important, right? If it's unimportant, then what are you doing? So there's certain positions that it would be difficult for you to take and still do your job. Is how I would think.
No,
Like
no, I
if they're
mean,
holding your paycheck
In
hostage.
that sense, I think
there's a lot of group reinforcement, a lot of you have to. There's a lot of pressure to conform to a particular culture, and I think also in a lot of those jobs. So even if you have dissenting opinions, you're strongly discouraged from representing them or saying them out loud.
yeah, even if you felt a different way, you might not want to say it in front of your peers. That's true. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly true of just social groups in general, where I'm in East Texas, and people who are Democrats may just be afraid to even, they say it's like coming out. as if you were coming out, for some very minority position of. So it's very scary for people to stand alone in a group who all think differently, certainly. But I do believe that people have the ability to change their mind, which is what Ariel's talking about. If we can get more people who are different minded than us to talk to us, we might change our minds, but probably there's an even better chance of us changing their mind. So
Right, because our position is relatively new in the political world, and it's very easy for people to paint everyone, like these days everyone is just painting something with a broad brush. It's like if you're not exactly in lockstep with my political beliefs, it must mean like you're the worst capitalist or you're the worst communist, and we're like, hang on a second, buddy. Let's just slow down. Let's just back up and let's just think about this logically.
I mean, I
And
think the whole left-right thing is kind of a 20th century construct that at this point probably leads you to mistaking conclusions more often than not these days.
right, yeah, assuming things, just like drawing these, conclusions, because everybody wants to like put everything into its neat little box, and that's not the way things work anymore. There's so many, like, so much gray area that people are overlooking and not paying attention to, and it's just like as enlightened people, we want to like make people aware of this. It's like, as good citizens, yeah, sometimes like
well, if
awareness
we invite them
itself
to our podcast, if we invite people to our podcast, right, they're in a different social group. We are the social group. And so it's much less likely for us to change our mind than for somebody else who's here on their own without backup.
I I don't think someone wants to come to your dinner table where the
It's a
main
chance
course
to if you
need to listen to, be willing
right.
to listen and say we do want to hear everything too.
Right. That's why we let Ella talk about
Yes.
why she was against it, and we want other people to talk about why they're against it. And if it's good, maybe one thing is just a misconception, and it's like, hey, no, like we're on your side, we're on your team. Like this is not, to help because it's like when the American army came over to help liberate the Jews, like the Jews weren't like, oh, you're white too, just like the Germans, so you're probably just here to like hurt us even more. It's like, no, wait, no, we're trying to help. It's like we're yeah, because sometimes it's just a little misconception, and then other things can just be worked out. Yeah. I
I
have
try to
faith.
I try to remind myself how disruptive of an idea UBI is. And it doesn't surprise me that a disruptive industry like technology would produce people who want to who see the clarity of it, the disruption of it. And so then, back to informing, but what we're trying to get to is convincing rather than just shouting down or getting people to conform on the basis of some kind of pressure or violence or something like that, where we actually want a deep convincing that comes from themselves, where they see themselves in it and identify with what it would do for them. Very simple.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we actually all pretty much agreed with her on many of her points important. Like if when we have a guest who is very different from us or have a position different from us, really, it's not that we're humanly different, but if they have a different position, we can still find a lot of common ground. Like we definitely
Right.
feel the sense that we can be working together on various issues that are not
Because
necessarily UBI first.
because I think the whole like media industrial complex thrives off of conflict, and they don't see the kind of damage that they're causing to people's mental health, to like the national discourse of this country, and there has to be some kind of mitigating factor, but unfortunately, like I think like anger and frustration and hatred garners a lot more attention than people just getting along, and that's just something that little by little we can maybe people are so sick and tired of the hatred and division and all of this stuff that they just want to see people get along now. I don't know.
I think they just want to
What
be
if we
okay.
what if we made a point to spend the first I'm sorry.
Wait, what if you made a point?
Go ahead.
What if we made a point of spending the first half of our discussions with whoever it is we're talking, spending time understanding them better.
Yeah.
If we made an agreement that we would do that before we all kind of pile in.
Make the gang less gangland fighting. Less gang.
Right. Make
Let's
a make a like the Yang group instead of the gang, even though it
instead of the
doesn't rhyme as nice.
gangsters. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've run
But
panel discussions before in other genres, and that was something we really tried to make a point to do, is let the guest kind of have a complete thought, and then be more about asking questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can treat it like an interview at first, and then have like more of like a free for all after. But
yeah.
It's difficult because
It's
our format is built so that we have a roundtable format where each of us is equally important, rather than the guest being the interviewer, the being interviewed, and the guest being the spotlight of the show all the time. And so that's something we don't communicate well to our guests before they come sometimes. And so we may have different expectations of what to get here.
Yeah. But that's what makes us
So
unique.
Karen, your podcast is more of an Yeah, Karen, your podcast and also Ariel, both of you have your own shows that you do, and in both of your shows, you really make the person being interviewed the spotlight of the show, and you spend a lot of time discussing with them. That may be a better format for convincing someone, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that like since I'm a one man show on my own thing, like it can't really be a round table.
Yeah, I have sort of the complete thought. So like I pick a theme for the show and then I just kind of have my own, complete thought, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, and then interview someone. And at the time that I'm doing that interview, I give them the gist of what it is we're on about. And then I really do want to have that conversation. And I often surprise guests because they don't expect to be listened to, which is interesting. And then I like to ask questions that kind of makes them feel not just welcome, but really gets to a deeper levels, if I can, with people, because there's kind of what we shoot the breeze about in kind of a superficial level, and then it starts to sound like an echo chamber. And there's levels under the levels that have great influence, like a current in the ocean. And if you can get people to feel accepted and comfortable to say some of that stuff, and then it's more a questioning rather than, sometimes there's words that sound like disagreement that really aren't.
Right. But I think we have to do
That's
away with this
true.
culture
Yeah.
that the people who disagree are sworn enemies to like be defeated in the ultimate argument that's gonna make them feel like, oh, we've owned them and we've destroyed them and stuff. That's unhealthy.
Yeah, but you haven't influenced them or discoursed with them or come to any kind of agreement, which basically becomes everything's locked into place. And there's a lot of the battle mentality. There's a lot of collateral damage that has not been acceptable to other people.
Right, yeah.
So thank you for letting me join you for the last moments of the podcast today. I wish I'd gotten here earlier to stream to Twitch from the beginning. Sorry I missed the beginning part.
Right. Yeah, it's that
Do you guys want to sign off now? And we're going to get back together tonight for our group meeting in terms of business, getting some business done.
That's coming up in 2 hours at 7 o'clock
So I want everyone
sharp.
to have a good break.
So yeah, everyone should please come to that if you can, and hopefully we'll work out some of these technical problems that have just reared their head. Perhaps it's a blessing in disguise that we were reminded of what our technical problems are right before our big meeting, because we had a good smooth run for a while. So we'll talk about that. Faye, you want to conduct the sign-offs that you're so good at conducting? Because I will never remember to do it.
Call names.
Yeah. My
Let's
ADD
start with Karen.
just,
how's that?
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, my name's Karen. My podcast is the Care Worth Podcast, asking the question, what is care worth to society? What would UBI do for citizens? Thank you.
That is such an amazing question. And you can build, there's really so much conversation to be had around that one important question. My name is Faye Koo, and I'm in East Texas. So you can find me on at Palestine Math on Twitter, because Palestine is the city that I live in. And I am also on Facebook as Faye Koo, Faye. Last name is spelled Ku. And let's go to Ariel.
Yeah, my name is Ariel. You can find me at Twitter on Ariel's Ariels. And I also have a YouTube page called Revolutionary Thinking.
Very good. And how about Moto?
I'm Moto, and I am on Twitter at MotoMotes. That's MOTO_MOTES.
Very nice. And Shale, take it away.
My name is Shale, and my Twitter is SHAELRILEY. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.